Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the second day of our virtual conference. My name is Jamie Hall and I am the Customer Experience Director at Posturite. I'm delighted to be the host for today's event. With me today, we have from the Posturite team, but of course in the virtual background, Emily and Adele, who will be here to assist with any technical support and also the Q&A sessions that we've got scheduled for the end of each presentation. We've got 4 great topics today and 4 excellent speakers, all who have a huge level of knowledge and experience in their field. So we're really hoping that today's going to be a great event as yesterday's was on day 1. Just a couple of pointers for you before we get started. For your information, we do have the captions function enabled, so please feel free to use that should you wish. Any questions that you have that are raised and you'd like answered during the presentations, please send those through, and what we'll do, we'll try to answer as many of those as possible at the end of each session. We've allocated sort of between 10 and 15 minutes for questions at the end, but should you not get your question answered and you would really like that to be done, you can always send those through, and I'll give you an email address now, which would be events@posturite.co.uk, and we'll get those to the relevant presenters and get the answers back to you. And the final thing from me before we start is that all of today's presentations are being recorded, and we will send those out to the whole delegate list in the coming few days. So we are working on quite a tight schedule today. So I think the best thing to do is get us underway and introduce the first session, which will be with Andy Rigby. Andy is the regional manager for the North, as well as being our lead for the enablement division at Posturite, which deals with the more complex assessment needs for our clients. Andy has a background in sports science, is an accredited sports coach, and has been at Posturite for over 17 years. He's a very highly regarded member of the team, and today he's going to speak to us about why he believes assessments are going to be vital as we move into hybrid working. Andy, I'll pass over to you.
Thanks, Jamie. That's a very nice intro. Thanks very much. Thanks to everyone for joining us. Hope you all got some good takeaways out of yesterday for those that have joined us yesterday, and hopefully likewise today. As Jamie said, my talk is about why assessments will be vital as we move towards hybrid working. Now, perhaps on the face of it, it's quite an easy question to answer, but what I'd like to do is get into the detail around this, looking at the current state of play, looking at risks around hybrid working, having different workstations, having a change in working patterns, and potentially some solutions to this, and specifically looking at workers with disabilities. Certainly don't have all the answers, and like a lot of people over the last 12 months, we're learning and adapting along the way. Apologies if some of the terminology is slightly different to some that you may use internally, but I think a lot of our findings are based on speaking to a lot of clients and engaging an idea of what's happening out there. As Jamie said, feel free to send the questions through. We'll certainly do our best to come back to you either today or after the talk. So we're going to look at the minute of sort of where we are, and we're still sort of in this sort of parallel universe, really, where the current situation is very real. We're still in a strange period where the restrictions are being eased, but we still don't know what's going to happen over the next few months, what the next few months will bring, what will happen, what it's going to look like from a working point of view. We, of course, all have hope, but we're still uncertain of what's going to happen. So that makes it difficult for both employers and employees to make long-term decisions around working patterns. What we found is home working projects have accelerated and almost happened overnight last year. So many organisations have said to us that it would potentially take 2, 3, 4 years to implement a home working policy, even on rotation, even making sure that workstations are suitable, etc. But it was almost forced upon so many workers overnight with no prior warning. So the impact of this is obviously potentially huge for everyone involved. Creating workstations like this one, the picture that you see on the screen that I put on my LinkedIn profile last year, which I'm quite impressed with the ironing board in front of the TV. it got quite some good feedback on social media. May not cover the regulations. I don't think ironing boards are part of the regulations, but this sort of stuff happened up and down the country. And I think what I liked about seeing some pictures like this is that people actually did put some thought into the setups, which was great. You know, rather than a sort of very stereotypical bog standard laptop on a dining room table. Working patterns have changed. It's a generalisation, but I think the 9 to 5, 5 days a week dramatically disappeared, and this sort of meant that workforces were all working differently, dependent on their environment and the situation. I think previously many workers had to prove that they had the right environment for home working. We've been involved in quite a lot of assessments where it's been a process that somebody may want to work from home for a day or two a week, and the process has took weeks or months for this to be approved. And now it was almost assumed that everything's okay, you're all okay, you can all work from home, just because we obviously had very little choice. And again, that can have a huge impact on an individual. I think the regulations didn't necessarily guide us to a standard during a pandemic. Obviously, the goalposts were moved massively. It made it difficult for employees to implement a good standard practice throughout. And the last one, do we know the impact of home working? I think for me, this is a huge conversation to have, and it deserves, it probably in the future deserves a talk in its own right of what has been the impact during this last 12, 14 months. And I think I challenge every organisation to look at this specifically. I think we might look at numbers, we might look at productivity, we might look at overheads from a business point of view to see how home working has worked for organisations, but to a person, you know, how has this home working impacted individuals so far? I'd probably argue at the period we're in at the minute, we may not know the impact home working's had on employees yet, and we may not know for some time, but it's certainly a big topic over the coming weeks. So what are the next steps? Now, we're told that hybrid working is the way forward. We're told that this is the future. This is what's happening over the next weeks, months, however long this period is going to be. Are we asking the question? Are we asking the question of our employees, or is this a business decision? It certainly ticks a lot of boxes in the current situation. I think where staff may get the best of both worlds in terms of family life, in terms of keeping offices low in population, still interacting with employees, not sitting on the M25 or in my case the M62 5 days a week, which is I'm certainly not missing sitting on there. And we're sort of told that everything in moderation is good for us. Generally in life, everything in moderation is good for us. Work from home for a bit, work from the office for a bit, then that'll be great. So this must fit in with working life if it fits in with everything else. But does it? And that's probably a question to throw back. Now, I've seen quite a few different percentages of where people want to work over the next few weeks, months. I know there was a couple on a couple of the talks yesterday, but one of the recent YouGov surveys that I looked into, it suggested 39% of people want hybrid working. So, but to me, this is a sort of real generalisation. I think we need to delve into that when we look into this for workers with disabilities. In August last year, 73% of disabled staff who took part in a Unison study said that they were as productive or more productive working from home, and 54% of those people said they prefer to work from home in the future. So this is a real shift to pre-COVID working life, if any of us can remember what that looked like. It seems so long ago, but quite a high number that may not benefit from switching between the two. And again, we go back to the balance of the individual. I think sort of for balance of the survey in August 2020, that the survey may not have given hybrid working as an option, but it gives you an idea that it isn't a sort of a one or the other solution, I think, for a lot of people. Now, I had a lot of conversations at the back end of last year to say that home working's here to stay, Andy. Everyone's going to want to work from home. No one's going to want to go back to the office. And I think over time, I mean, I disagreed generally with that at the time. I thought there was always places for that the office had a huge place, and people needed that interaction. And I think the more we've been into various lockdowns, people have realised that more so that is key. But it obviously depends on people's own environment and circumstances, which I'll go into. One of the key things in the Unison survey was saying that people that felt less productive working from home, and one of the reasons for that was lack of reasonable adjustments to support them, such as keyboards, speech to text software, things like Dragon voice activated software, things like that, simple fixes that people may have been aware of that they needed. So what worked before? What worked before employees had to work from home? What worked for them in the office? I think that's a real key question that needs to be asked for internally and for individuals. I think we're still picking up cases now where staff have been home working since March last year and are requesting reasonable adjustments just to replicate what they had in the office, and this is 14-15 months on. So the physical and mental health impacts of this time period without those adjustments, now they're potentially difficult to measure, but for those who have had to work without the right tools, it potentially has impacted them in some form, and I'll talk about this later on. A little a few conversation starters, a few examples of the things we're talking about. Now, there's probably a few sort of generalizations here, but hopefully this goes back to the original question of why assessments are important, and more so during this pandemic and the period we're in at the minute. I think when I have these conversations around 1 in 6 people in the UK are affected by some level of hearing loss, 1 in 10 of the population is estimated to have dyslexia. It generally surprises people, I think, how high they are when you sit down and look at these kind of stats. And interestingly, I had a meeting with a major organisation some 3 or 4 years ago, which stuck with me. I obviously won't name them, but it's an organisation that everyone on this call will have heard of. I asked what the process was for people who had dyslexic tendencies or requested reasonable adjustments, and the reply I got was, "Oh, we don't have anyone with dyslexia. No one's come forward. We've not got anyone that's dyslexic." And I was sat in a head office with 2,500 people around me. Now, by some sheer coincidence, maybe they didn't, but obviously the stats show that 1 in 10 generally are. So you're talking upward of 250 people that may have been within that office that may have had some form of dyslexic tendencies. Now, was the process clear enough for people to come forward, or was there no process in place to raise awareness amongst staff, amongst line managers, amongst HR? I think it's probably an interesting question to have, and perhaps now, knowing a little bit more, sort of 3 or 4 years on, I may have challenged that a little bit further in the hope of maybe helping people that may need it. But it was an interesting conversation that stuck with me, and that goes back to the original point of do we know what the stats are? This is generally what the numbers that we're coming back with, and perhaps that's the case in your organisation to a point. I saw a sort of big statistic last week. It was in the press last week, actually, which worked well for this presentation, that Specsavers came out and said they usually carry out 8.6 million eye examinations annually. And out of those 8.6 examinations, they refer more than 600,000 people to hospital or to the GP for further investigations for various health and wellbeing issues. So that's almost 7% of the general eye tests that Specsavers see. They send for further investigation due to one, various health or wellbeing issues. So a lot of that is now been lost through the pandemic. Generally, numbers are down massively on routine checkups, and people may be dealing with a lot of this sort of stuff at home or completely unaware that there's an issue. So what are your organisation's policy on eye tests? Is it logged? Is it encouraged? It's sort of just a simple process that can be huge for an individual. I saw a further study actually by Specsavers again of 2,000 adults that had revealed that at least 1 in 10 people fear they may have a serious underlying sight condition, whilst 1 in 20 worried that they have a potentially significant issue with their hearing. Now, this impacts individuals in a new world of sitting at your computer on Zoom calls, on Teams calls, on laptops that none of us can escape, unfortunately. And actually, we're doing it more and more. Somebody made a great point on Catherine Louise's talk yesterday that actually we in the office we're encouraged to go and do walking meetings, whereas that can't be the case now. Our meetings are here. So you're going to spend more time in front of your computer. So this potentially becomes a significant issue, and that's both physically and mentally as well. These appointments, they may trigger things that just a minor adjustment can solve or can help with, but it actually could be as extreme as saving someone's life. That is sort of as extreme as some of these appointments can be. I talked about the impact upon individuals. On an individual's mental health, with it being Mental Health Awareness Week, it's a great time to have the conversation as it is always. And it's worth noting that a mental health condition is considered a disability if it has a long-term effect on your day-to-day normal day-to-day activity. So this is defined under the Equality Act, the 2010 Equality Act. So your condition is long-term if it lasts or is likely to last 12 months or more. So how can an individual be impacted? How can on their mental health when home working, but also home working without the right adjustments, or even if none of these things have been even picked up. So stress and anxiety is based around the pressures of work, not keeping up with a team, not keeping within deadlines, making mistakes, not understanding some instructions. Doesn't make for a healthy working environment, and it has an impact. Isolation is potentially the most common amongst all home workers. I think it's something that the vast majority of home workers will probably have felt at some point. It's suddenly sort of the office life and the banter and the conversation is all gone. And I for those that know me, I've probably bored them with my sports coaching background before, but I likened this last week to a sports person that stops playing the sport that they've played for years, and they always say in interviews, we miss the buzz of training, we miss the atmosphere, we miss being amongst our teammates. And that might be extreme, but there's potentially a similar feeling when you're used to being in the office full time all the time, and now you're at home, and then if you're at home without the right adjustments, again that has an impact. The condition may get worse. Out of sight workers for 14 months means it's hugely challenging to look after all staff well-being through this time. It's a real challenge, but something that's left or something that an individual isn't aware of may get worse over the course of time. We had an assessment over the last few weeks. Actually, I spoke to one of our consultants this week that an individual had significant migraines, which we're actually I'll speak about shortly. Actually, we're getting quite a lot of. Ultimately, it was where the glare was coming off the patio doors, hitting a very glossy dining room table, and the individual was getting really bad headaches. Now, we solved that, a bit of sort of investigative work with the assessment and doing a Teams call and looking at the setup. But glare issue may have been resolved in the office immediately. It may have been resolved in a day to a trained eye that said you shouldn't have your laptop facing the window. You need to move side on. All these little things like that. But if it's spotted in the office, but it's different when people are home working and out of sight, and we don't know, and they're left to their own devices. So that's a challenge. Productivity can be affected, as I mentioned in the second slide, with regards to stress, anxiety. That actually this may be a new job role. It may be a different job role. That means a new way of working. Individuals may need further support with this. And people questioning their own worth. Do they feel like they're adding value? It's not a nice place to be. But a combination of these may lead to this, which is not good for staff well-being. Some home working factors, some will class some as positive, some will not. It's all very subjective. All factors, and every single person will react to each challenge differently, depending on their circumstances. and dependent on their ability. I think if I probably had to hang my hat on one thing, it'd be not to generalise that this is what everyone will think, but this is a sort of small snippet that we got from a study we did with a few clients last year. And I go back to the original question of assessing individuals to make sure they're comfortable, to make sure they're in a good working environment, and make sure they've got the tools to do the job that they've been employed to do. The positive feedback we got from the survey was no commute, or no commute now. As I've mentioned earlier, sitting on a motorway every morning, which I can completely understand, dealing with traffic or the tube or the underground, etc. No office politics, which I won't delve into too much. No confrontations or less conflict with people that you work with. Is an interesting one that I'm sure a lot of staff may have potentially gone into work and had conflict with other members and sort of dreaded that to a certain extent, that they don't now have that. So there's positives around that as well. Dress code, less of a dress code, unless you're on calls like this. You're having meetings and you sort of have a top half dress code now. Office noise, so there's less distraction. Distraction is a big one, reducing the amount of distraction that people have. Potentially negative feedback we got was a noise at home. Again, I can vouch for that one. I did the first lockdown last year with a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and an 8-month-old. So if any of you were on any calls with me, and you might have heard a few screams in the background, sort of April, May time last year. The environment at home, and also there's probably an assumption here generally that people have a home to work from, or a bedroom or a box room or a dining room or utility room, wherever people have work. But what we actually found last year, which was interesting, is and this was probably more particularly in London, just due to the population and the makeup of the city, that a lot of people were renting a single room. And that's where they ate, that's where they slept, that's where they worked, and they were obviously locked down, and that was everything. So you assume that space is okay, but actually there's a lot of circumstances where there's a lack of space, which again can be a huge factor. Compromising with other family members that are working from home as well. Isolation, which I've mentioned, pressures of out of hours working now. Which can add to a bit of stress. Your workstation's right in front of you. So do you reply to that 8 o'clock email that you perhaps wouldn't have seen if you were in the office? And potentially, are you doing a different job role now due to the changes, meaning that the job had to change, or how do you approach the job role that needed to change? So we go back to the original question. And hopefully this will sort of go full circle and paint a picture of what potentially people may be dealing with, and why assessments are vital if people do move to hybrid working. The first one for me, and it's a phrase that I repeat over and over when I'm in meetings and speaking to organisations, is that the individual wants to do the job to the best of their ability. And I repeat that phrase quite a lot, generally within my job role, because for me, that's it. Ensure the staff can demonstrate the strengths, and whilst that's whether they've got the right tools to do that is the big question, but generally for me, that's what people want to do. Individuals now have potentially 2+ workstations, and are we replicating what works for the home workstation as we did for the office workstation? I think that's probably the big one in these circumstances, and the setup needs to be the same or as close as possible. It may be different if somebody's working from home, say 1 day a week, but then we can delve into that and look at the tasks that they're doing. If they're set up in the office for 4 days a week, is significantly more suited. So it's a big question, really, and again, that comes back down to what the individual is doing. Outside workers, which I've mentioned through hybrid working, it's still likely actually that you probably will rarely see staff in the work environment for long periods, still over the next good few months. So can we pick up on some of these issues, tendencies that may occur? New workstations. A major organisation said to me this week actually that over the next few months, they're going to shut 2 offices in the same area through this phase. They're going to concentrate on getting one particular office COVID safe. We're going to reduce the capacity. So workers are now potentially coming into a different workstation, either for the first time or almost a different workstation every day. So how do we manage these challenges? That's potentially a big factor as well. And staff may have a new job role. They may have a new way of working that was almost forced upon them just due to the nature of the lack of face-to-face that we've been able to have. And a great example of this is actually our own assessors. So they were previously on the road 4 or 5 days a week doing face-to-face assessments. I'm sure the vast majority of you will have used us for that service, for our assessment service, and now overnight they were doing all the assessments remote, which was working great from a business point of view for both parties. But we need to manage that individually of how that looks for our assessors, as they don't have that face-to-face interaction that they were so used to every day. Mental and physical health, which I've touched on, are all factors to ensure we get this right. And there's, of course, a duty of care to ensure all staff are looked after. So identifying potential issues now, or potential traits, should I say. Now this is a challenging part. This is a tough part for a lot of organisations, because generally, obviously, a big part of what we do is look after people with musculoskeletal issues, which is far easier to identify as generally someone has discomfort. So more attention and detail, I feel, is needed here to be able to identify and help staff if they need this. And there are a lot of organisations that bring consultants in to put this kind of process in place. And for me, with obviously, I've never been involved with the actual process, but speaking to organisations who have put this in place, having single entry points for either individuals, for line managers, is tends to be key. It sort of simplifies the process, whether that's a line manager, whether that entry point is a team of people, whether it's an inbox. For me, I describe it as someone sort of jumping on a stepping stone with lots of different paths in front of them, and once they're on that stepping stone, that then sends them down the right path for them. And I think that having that first bit, just having it a sort of clear, simple process at the start, then just helps the whole process going forward. So things I'm talking about are things like dyslexia screeners that we have online, eye tests, which I've mentioned, hearing tests, diagnostic assessments, internal forms, wellbeing platforms, e-learning, psychologists doing screening, clinical referrals. It'd be great actually if either today or in the future, people do have real good best practice on this, or even send them through on the Q&A if anybody wants to share a good example of what people do here. It'd be good for us to learn and everyone to sort of share good practice. It'd be great. Workplace needs, which is a workplace needs assessment, which is specific to the individual's job role, their environment, and any issues that they're currently facing. So there's a specific outcome that's relevant to that organisation. Sorry, that's relevant to that individual, and the organisation gets a sort of a recommendation as to what that person needs. GP referrals, and then of course DSE assessments can pick up potential issues, especially in circumstances such as visual impairments. So how can assessments help? There are far more people more qualified than me to go through this, but to pick up on a point, someone said to me recently that the assessments just lead to software, they lead to expensive kit, and this sort of just demonstrates that it's not always about this. I think there are many circumstances where individuals may just need to discuss the strategy of how they approach things, and how others approach them is a big one. So little things like getting agendas, this is sort of simple things for me, but getting agendas early for meetings, but that can make a huge difference rather than it just be thrown on people straight away. Captions on video calls like this, hopefully it's picked up my dodgy Northwest accent, the captions on here, but it just allows staff to follow the conversation better, particularly if they have a hearing impairment. getting notes in different formats. Personally, I'd much rather someone talk to me through something than send it me in a text, whether that's via an audio note or a phone call. It's a lot easier to do these days with everyone having phones and being able to send audio notes. So it's an additional option. Comms cards in meetings, time capping meetings, and even where an individual would like to sit. I think people have been used to being at home for 12, 14 months, and people are now going to start getting comfortable in their environment, and now we're going to return to this different environment or the environment you had before, and people may need help with that, and that again is a subject within itself. Assistive technology, of course, comes into it. It's quite often something that can be recommended. I mean, someone may have accessibility options on the computer that they may not be aware of. So things like voice activated software on a MacBook is already there. If you've got a MacBook, you don't need to purchase Dragon, for example. It's already built in, and people may not be aware of that. So triggering those kind of facilities, I think accessibility options on laptops are significantly improving, and the smallest change can make a big difference there. So the assistive technology, of course, it can make a huge difference for people, and it's certainly not expensive, doesn't have to be expensive. And this can be via an assessment, it can be on the back of an access to work assessment if you use the access to work scheme where recommendations are made and lists of suppliers are listed. But generally we work with a lot of organisations where we can provide everything on the list for access to work. So it actually helps the individual because equipment is coming from one place or software is coming from one place, and you can coordinate that rollout with the end user rather than things coming from different directions. So that can help as well. And strategy coaching as well, that can help, which covers a lot of things that I've mentioned on this slide in terms of things that are specific to their job role and things to help them. So here's an example of just some of the assessments we've been asked to do since the start of the first lockdown, which seems so long ago for staff working from home. Just to give you an idea, many I've mentioned already actually, but we've assessed individuals who have been suffering with long COVID, so a little bit sort of different. So this is sometimes affected people's speech. It's affected their ability to work for long periods due to fatigue, so adjustments to the working practices need to be made. Migraines is one that I mentioned earlier, which we've had a lot of over the last year or so. But people, I mean, if people aren't commuting to work, they're potentially logging on at the time they would jump in the car or set off for work, and logging off at the time they would have got home. So we could be doing another hour or two a day in front of the screen here, and we're not having those walking meetings. So there's a real risk with that as well, and that needs to be managed. I think the two things that sort of benefit from working from home is that you can control. When I first started this job a long time ago, a health and safety manager told me there are two things in the office that no one will agree on. One's lighting and one's temperature. And it did make me laugh, and it's always been something that has always cropped up over time. But it's two things that you can control now when you're working from home. But if you're working on glossy tables with patio doors, like I mentioned before, then it's getting that education, that knowledge across of how to set that up, and they come from assessments, they come from that education. We've seen a rise in referrals for ADHD, actually adult ADHD. For no reason maybe other than greater awareness generally, which is great. So as I say, this is just a sort of few examples of the assessments we've done through the lockdown periods. There are certainly more that we can help with. We've often had a sort of robust triage process. If a member of staff doesn't necessarily know which assessment is needed, this is something we can help with. I go back to the stepping stone example before. If we don't necessarily know which path for the individual that they need to go on, then that's something we can help with the triage call, and that can engage the individual. It can engage the team around them as well, a line manager, the organisation, to make sure that everyone's on the same page and everyone's moving forward as needs to be. So yeah, so hopefully this gives you a good overview, creates awareness regarding how assessments are so important during this period. I appreciate that every working environment is different, and if there are any specific areas where you feel we can help, then do let us know. We can arrange separate conversations around this to be able to create a process that fits with the organisation. And I think just to add a little bit of balance to the assessments as well, it's something, a conversation I've had this week, is that quite often we can help organisations with unreasonable adjustment requests from employees, which do occur. It's just the way that these things do occur. So we can manage expectations all around here too. Sometimes an external view on the situation that can really help and actually view what the individual is entitled to. It gives a different perspective. It might reduce the expectation of the employee. But I think, and this is probably a good thing to end on, what I emphasise is the end goal for us is always to enable the individual to be productive in their role. And yeah, I think it's probably a good place to end on. I shall hand back to Jamie if he's still there.
I am still there. Yes, I am still here, Andy. Thank you very much for that. Very interesting. Lots of things covered there. Some of those statistics that you were mentioning at the start, incredible change in how people are working now and thinking about working from home, both as an employee and, of course, as an employer. We're a little bit tight on time. I'm just trying to get a couple of questions in for you, Andy. If you can be as sharp as you can with your answers.
Right.
The first one here is, what have you found to be the biggest challenges when dealing with reasonable adjustments for disabled staff?
The biggest challenges, I think when it happened last year, one of the biggest challenges was the speed of what happened. I think a lot of organisations had to get the priorities in place, i.e. when staff were working from home, the first port of call was usually getting the IT equipment up and running, laptops, computers. Then it was potentially the setup, if people needed office furniture, chairs, desks, that kind of thing. So this was further down the track. So I think getting those processes in place, but I think that and the biggest challenge being actually that initial process of what their internal process looks like. I think that is probably the main area of focus for me, for organisations, because I think that's probably from feedback I get, that's one of the biggest challenges.
Okay, thank you very much. Another one here, just trying to fit a couple of quick ones in. Is the employer responsible for maintaining two workstations, whether that would be the home and the office? That might actually be more Simon from a legal perspective, but I don't know if you've had any of that conversations when you've been talking to clients.
I've not. It probably is one. If for Simon to follow up on next in terms of that of what the obligations are, I think that's a perfect one to tee up the 245.
Fine.
You told me to be quick.
And we've got one here. Yeah, no, it's fine. And this one, again, might be a little bit guided towards Simon as well, but I just want to get it out there so people can hear the question. There's an organisation that have said that they don't need to provide equipment for home working, I assume, unless an employee has to change of contract to be a permanent home worker. If they choose, as individuals, I'm expecting here, to work from home 1 or 2 days a week, they do not have to provide any equipment. Can they dispute that? Again, it's probably a legal one, but
it is probably a legal one. I think from conversations I've had, you need to obviously be a contracted home worker to get this. But I think there's probably a different conversation there when I go back to the duty of care question as well. Is do you want to look after the employees and make sure that they are sort of well equipped? But from a legal point of view, if it's black and white, I'll probably bat that one straight back to Simon.
I think it's always been a grey area, and it's probably a greyer area now than it's ever been, actually, because
it is.
I think there's going to be an expectation that people are going to be wanting to work from home more. It's been successful. Can they vouch for the productivity? And where's the responsibility lie with the employer for the equipment and those things. So
Yeah.
look, that's been great, Andy. Like I said, we are on a bit of a tight schedule. The tech ladies are giving me a bit of a nudge already that we need to move on. So look, I'll say thank you very much on behalf of everyone that's listened for that today. If you've got any other questions that you'd like answered, as well as a couple that we haven't got to, send them into the events at Posturite email address, and we'll get those to Andy. And for those who are joining the next session, you need to leave this session and then go to the link which can be found in your itinerary for each of the 4 sessions this afternoon. That's the plan to follow, and I will see you back here shortly for the next session at 2:45. Andy, thanks very much indeed.
Thanks, Jamie.